everybody. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for coming to the talk after the lunch hour. I appreciate it. I'm Luke, founder and CEO of ManageXR. Looking forward to talking a little bit today about scaling from 1 to 1,000 devices. Hope you come from this talk with some playbooks, some frameworks to think about large-scale deployments, and of course, learning a little bit about how we can help you do that. Let's get started. ManageXR is the core infrastructure that enables organizations to use XR at scale. So it's our goal to enable companies to truly unlock the power of this technology. And in order to do that, that means deploying it at scale and using it at scale. We're talking thousands of devices across an organization being used for all different kinds of things. I want to start a little bit telling you about how I came to this challenge and how I really learned all about it. So in 2017, I started working with a group of doctors at Stanford Children's Hospital. And we were developing VR content to reduce pain and anxiety in pediatric patients. We were using technology to replace pharmaceutical drugs, and it was awesome work. And it really had a lot of success. We were using it during distraction therapy for acute procedures. We were using it for physical therapy. I truly saw just how valuable this tech can be outside of entertainment and fun. In 2017, that was early days of VR. So with all the success that we were seeing, we got the opportunity to scale that deployment. So it was no longer just within Stanford Children's Hospital. We got the opportunity to put 1,000 devices across 200 hospitals. And naturally, that's a completely different challenge. Our goal is to kind of put a kit together, VR headsets, all of our clinical software, and then put that around the world so that other individuals could use that technology during their clinical procedures. The challenges here are a lot different than being an individual in the hospital putting VR on kids, right? The challenge here is all about scale. It's no longer, for us, we had seen the value of VR. Now, can we scale it? And so the challenges that we learned here are what became ManageXR. Let's talk about them a little bit. The challenges are going to sound kind of simple, but when you're talking about scale, it's typically these small things that can really balloon into massive hurdles. So the first one is, how do we set up 1,000 devices? This is a question that we were asking ourselves. At the time, I was in my garage setting up 5 devices at a time, taking them out of new boxes, loading them with all of our software and settings that we needed to load them with, and then bringing them to the hospital to be used by our doctors and our nurses. But naturally, this is a completely different challenge when we're talking about thousands of devices. So oftentimes when we think about VR deployments, and these are new, innovative things that are happening inside of innovation labs of companies and things like that, it's often easy to overlook these small little challenges as early adopters. And we think, oh, we'll just do it manually. But the second you're talking about scale, you need to think about all those little things that you're doing manually and how you're going to actually scale that. So setting up devices can be really painful. Now, how do we update software on those devices once they're deployed around the world? In our case, we were constantly fixing bugs, pushing new features, even releasing new content to our physicians. And we needed to make sure that those devices had that content, had those updates as soon as they were ready. We couldn't ask our doctors and nurses to be their own IT experts. The process of updating a device involves plugging it into a computer and side-loading content onto it. And there's just no way you're going to be able to get your implementers and your end users to do that. So you need to make that as seamless as possible. And finally, how do we streamline the actual user experience? VR is very new, and it can be challenging for new users. It's easy to get lost in user interfaces. You're trying to learn how to use new control schemes. But the time to value is super critical in these enterprise deployments. In our case, we were having to have doctors and nurses become comfortable enough with VR to be able to put it on 8-year-old kids during a medical procedure. You couldn't ask for a more complicated situation that needs to be extremely easy and seamless. So we had to make sure that challenge was solved so that this could actually be used in hospitals by those who weren't VR experts like we were at the time. So I honestly kind of fell in love with these challenges, and I realized that these were the hurdles that were really preventing the adoption of this technology. In order to have companies unlock this power of this fascinating technology, we needed to be able to use it at scale. And so these became essentially the foundation of what ManageXR is today. Now, to give you a quick little run through of what the product is and how we help companies, we make devices really easy to set up. So our goal is for you to be able to unbox a headset, plug it into a computer, click a single button, never have to put the headset on your head, and then that device is fully set up and ready to go. So that 10 pages of manual instructions that you've written in the past to kind of set up devices and get them ready to go, well, that's all pre-programmed into these kind of an automated tool. During that setup process, a device is then registered to ManageXR, which is a management platform where you can see all of your devices online, and you can then deploy new content to them over time. Once you've set up a device, you never have to plug it into a computer again. And this is a dream for IT managers and anyone who really needs to be managing these software, these devices. So you want to be able to see them all in one place, deploy new content, and troubleshoot them as things are bound to come up. You want to be able to have real insights into device health, what's installed, what versions, things like that. And the final part to that question is making VR easy to use. So what's visualized here is a custom home screen that's available in our product. When you turn it on, it locks the device down to just a set of approved apps. Typically, these are apps that you've also deployed remotely. And so now you have your end users, the moment they put on a VR headset, instead of being brought into a consumer device with lots of different buttons to click and places to get lost, they have just a couple apps that they can click on, and they're into that experience as quickly as you need them to be. So this is what the custom home screen looks like. It's fully brandable as well, so you can drop in your own logos, drop in your own backgrounds, your own colors and themes, so you can really start to turn a VR headset into a complete solution and one that's designed for your specific use case. And the final thing with ManageXR is we want to make it really easy to measure. You know, we're still in the pilot phase of VR. It's new and growing. And so in an organization, you need to be able to track and measure metrics about your deployment, how much they're being used, what's the success. You need to be able to talk to stakeholders in your organization to continue to grow those pilots. And data is the only way to do that. Okay, that's a bit about ManageXR and how we came to what we are today. Let's talk about where we're seeing large deployments and who's doing them. Enterprises are doing very large deployments. These are typically people who are using VR at scale for internal purposes. So it's training employees, both hard skills and soft skills. It's giving salespeople and marketing people enablement tools so that they can educate potential customers. And it's productivity tools, whether those are online meetings or 3D design tools, collaboration tools. Anywhere where VR is creating new workflows and providing new value within the business, we're seeing large-scale deployments happen. Thousands of devices type of deployments. We're seeing a lot of action in healthcare. I spoke to it as my introduction into this world, but large-scale deployments within hospitals and startups who are servicing hospitals and different type of healthcare applications. One of our customers, XR Health, they have thousands of devices across the world. They're bringing physical therapy into patient homes. And that physical therapy is augmented with VR and making physical therapy a lot more fun and a lot more accessible. Just an example of healthcare. And then finally, education. So this is VR in schools, typically middle school and up, and higher education. VR augmenting the classroom and just bringing it. For all the same reasons training is so valuable in enterprise, it's incredibly effective in schools as well. Okay, I imagine everyone here is familiar with one of these, right? These are essentially where we all as an industry are seeing the most success. Okay, that's who's doing the deployments. Let's talk about what a life cycle of a large-scale deployment looks like. The first part is discovery. You're going to find some high-value use of VR in your organization. An enterprise isn't going to invest thousands of dollars, millions of dollars in new technology unless you've found something, a use case that is truly bringing some ROI back to the business. That's training your employees more effectively and more efficiently. It's opening up new workflows to get work done faster and better. So it's going to start with some thesis in some way that you've decided that VR is bringing some real value in your organization. You're then going to pilot it, and you're going to continue to iterate and pilot and grow your pilots over time. It might start with 5 devices, grow to 50, then 500, but all the way you're going to need to be demonstrating success and making sure that you can measure those results. Measure the learning outcomes, measure how often your devices are being used. All that data is super valuable and is helping you validate just the overall success of your whole deployment. A key metric that you should also be thinking about is just scalability. So this is something I'll speak to later, but your deployments, as you go, they need to be easy to deploy. You should have a 5-device deployment that can scale quickly into a 50-device deployment. That way you can show your organization, hey, we're ready to grow larger, faster, to the multi-thousand device deployments. At some nebulous line, you're now a large-scale deployment. You've grown your pilots enough to where you have a lot of the gaps, a lot of the kind of sticking points solved, and you're a large-scale deployment. You're going to keep running your program and growing it, but you have the tools and the processes in place. Okay, we've talked about what those deployments look like. We've talked about how they came to be. Let's talk about what makes a deployment. Here are the 4 pillars of a successful VR deployment, and this is going to kind of be a beginning of a framework that I hope y'all can take away from this. The first pillar is content. This is the software that you put on the devices, or it's the videos, whatever you may be using. It's the content that you're actually interfacing with to get value, training content, productivity, applications, you name it. Second is hardware. This is, of course, the hardware you're putting on your head. It's also any ancillary hardware that's going to support your deployments. Storage, cleaning, you name it. Management, that's where we come in. There are software tools that can really support your scaled growth. You're not going to be able to do this manually forever. And then finally, you need a great team. Let's dive into these. Using XR at scale requires a dedicated team that is ready to take on the challenge. VR is new. And so your team has to be ready to solve these challenges that are going to come up. You're going to be facing challenges that no one's ever solved before in your organization. So make sure that you have a team that's ready for that. Some of the key players here, your end users, the ones who are actually putting the headsets on their head. Your implementers, designing the XR program. They're managing the deployment over time, and they're measuring the success for continued growth. And then your IT team. All too often we see deployments and companies bring in the IT team too late, and they realize now that they're blaming the IT team for this massive hurdle that they're putting up. But the bottom line is your enterprise and your company has procedures for bringing in new technology. And so you make sure that your IT team is on your team and helping you. All right. The biggest thing I want you to take away from this slide, the content slide, large-scale deployments require that you source your content from outside of consumer stores. So often we see companies come in saying they love this new piece of content from the Oculus store and they want to put it on 200 devices across their schools or their company. That just isn't going to work. So you need to be able to source your content outside of consumer stores. Licensing of content from stores at scale is really challenging and basically impossible at this point. So where's the content going to come from? Well, there's a whole spectrum, all the way from entirely custom developed to off the shelf. A lot of different ways to get this content. You can build it in-house. There are ISVs and teams who are going to be able to help you either fully custom development or get you off the shelf. They'll really help you all the way in between and customize existing content that they've built. There are authoring tools that will help you put together interactive applications easily using content that you can kind of build. And so it's just an easier process for building content. And then fully off-the-shelf content. So these are collaboration tools, design tools, educational modules, just meeting and VR tools. A lot of different types of off-the-shelf content that can bring a lot of value into your organization. These are more or less a lot of the types of content we see deployed at scale. Okay, could spend forever talking about hardware, particularly which devices to choose. These are the 3 that we see used the most. If you've come to terms with the fact that you can use content, that you need to get your content from outside of a store, all of these devices are going to be feasible. And so we've seen large-scale deployments with all of them. I will say Pico probably has the easiest path to deployment in that they're enterprise devices. Vive has a great one too, but it's all feasible here. So I won't spend too much time harping on the different kind of hardware types. Happy to talk more about the pros and cons after the chat. And then I just wanted to throw up some pictures of different storage options. If you have shared usage of devices, just don't sleep on the fact that you need to figure out how you're going to store these devices, and there's just hardware involved in the overall logistics of a large-scale deployment. And the final piece is management. So software that enables you to remotely manage your devices. It improves the usability of your devices, and it just reduces manual labor and makes these programs actually scalable. Of course, this is ManageXR. So what you're going to get with ManageXR, you're going to be able to remotely distribute all of your content. You're going to be able to lock devices down to approved content so that the devices are really easy to use. You're going to be able to troubleshoot things so that when devices are breaking and you have an end user call you and say, hey, why isn't this working? You're going to be able to say, oh, the battery is dead, or it's missing this version of an application, connected to Wi-Fi, and you'll get the latest version. That kind of information that gives you health of your fleet. You're going to be able to track usage metrics so you can measure success, and ensuring security compliance. So this is protecting the IP that's on the devices, and it is making sure that you can connect to enterprise Wi-Fi networks, you name it. Your IT teams are going to be happy that you have a system like ManageXR in place as you think about scaling, because it's basically necessary to have an MDM on technology in the enterprise. Okay, when scaling with ManageXR, this is kind of a callback to the 3 questions I had spoken to earlier. You need to have answers for these. How are you going to set up all of your devices? How are you going to update the devices when you have new content for them? And how are you going to get your end users into these devices efficiently? So with ManageXR, I'm just going to kind of answer these questions for you. You can set up all your devices with the ManageXR device setup tool. I spoke to that earlier. I won't harp on that too much more. You can also use a provisioning partner. So we actually have partners where you can buy devices from them. They will set the devices up for you and then ship them out to where you want them to go. So when you're talking about thousands of devices, you're not going to have to put that burden on an internal team. There's real logistics involved with handling all of that. So managed service providers there are great. And another option is a factory preload. So we're actually preloaded onto Pico devices. So if you bought a new Pico device right now, you'd find ManageXR on the device. You could open up that app, enter in a registration code, and now that device is provisioned and ready to rock. So that's a great way to set up a lot of devices as well. Or we can work with the device manufacturers to kind of act as provisioning partners, and they'll preload all that content for you. Okay, how are you going to update those devices? Well, you're going to use ManageXR. That's easy. And then getting your devices into those, getting users into those devices efficiently. You're going to lock devices down, typically with a home screen, like I mentioned, or a kiosk mode, which limits the device to a single application. And you're going to have a well-designed implementation plan. People are involved at some point, so make sure your plan is solid. And it's going to grow over time, but you need a plan. Okay, let's talk about some playbooks. I just outlined a big framework by parts, but I want to show you what it looks like in practice. So let's talk about one of our customers, Brinks. Brinks is using VR to train their employees how to safely service ATMs. You probably know Brinks. Their armored cars move money around. So Brinks has 500 devices deployed across 75 branches, and they're using VR because it's more efficient to train their employees, and it's safer. They built their content using Scenario VR, an authoring tool. So they actually filmed all their content and then stitched it all together with a tool called Scenario. They landed on Pico hardware, which is 3DOF. They chose the Pico G2, which is a 3DOF headset. Great headset for large-scale deployments, particularly if you're just leaning on 360 content. And for management, what do you know? They went with ManageXR. ManageXR helps them see all of their devices in one place, keep the content up to date, so when they have new scenario modules and things, that's sent out. Their device setup process was done with a Pico factory preload. So we actually worked with Pico to load all the content onto the devices before they were shipped from China. And their user experience is a home screen locked down, and so that the trainers and the trainees are able to get into those headsets really quickly. And so these are shared devices in training facilities across the country. So, part of that user experience was training the trainers, making sure that they were comfortable using the technology. And that's all kind of facilitated by a really easy-to-use device. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about the second playbook. It's similar. They've got Oculus. The only key difference is Oculus devices. They use a provisioning partner, and they're actually dedicated devices for individuals. But again, management here is super key for this type of deployment. I'm kind of coming to the end of my talk, and I want to leave some time for questions. But what I want you to come away with from this talk is two things. First, this playbook is super helpful to help you identify gaps and make you think about deployments at scale. Obviously, every one of these sections has a million little line items underneath it that you want to solve, and you will grow into this and learn it over time. But this is a nice framework to use. And the second thing I want you to remember is that ManageXR is here to help. We've done this with hundreds of companies across tens of thousands of devices. We have a free trial that you can use to kind of see what management tools can bring. Highly recommend that you think about device management earlier in your piloting process. And stop by our booth. Come chat with us. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Oh, is it on? Yes. Hi. Thank you, Luke. Let's give him another round of applause. Do we have any questions? We have some microphones up here on the side if anyone wants to hop up. We have a few more minutes. I can also bring the microphone to you.
Brave soul.
Yeah.
When choosing you guys, how long do you expect to see an improvement? So, like, for example, if you're doing this on your own versus using you, like, how much of a % increase would there be on average for time to deployment?
Oh, time to deployment. I mean, that's a great question. I don't have exact metrics for you, but it depends kind of when you come to us in your process. Obviously, we highly recommend that you come to us early in your pilot stage so that you have these tools on the back burner, like in your back pocket when you're ready to pull them out. So with the Brinks example, we help them do a 40-device deployment, and then as soon as they were ready to go to 500 devices, it was literally flipping a switch and just buying the devices. So it made it scaling from a small thing to a large thing a no-brainer and really easy. I think if you don't have a solution in place for that jump, well, I don't know if it's even possible, to be honest. So it's really nice to have these things in place early on so that you can just get used to using them and build them into your own process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for the question.
Yeah, thank you.
What else? What else do we want to ask Luke while we still have him for here for a few more minutes? Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.